The rise of populism poses a dangerous threat to human rights. Trump gained power in the United States. Various politicians are seeking power in Europe through making appeals to racism, xenophobia, nativism, and misogyny. They all have in common the claim to speak for the majority and to claim that that majority wants rights violated in the name of securing jobs, or avoiding cultural change, or protecting against terrorism. We've seen this show before. In the last century, various communist and fascist governments also claimed to speak for the majority and then visited enormous repression on their people. Even today, people like President Erdogan in Turkey or President Sisi in Egypt at first had great popularity when Erdogan went against the alleged plotters of the coup or Sisi went against the Muslim Brotherhood. But each took that willingness to violate human rights to great extremes as they suppressed any peaceful protest against their rule. There is this tendency today to think that the strong man delivers best. But if you look at people like Vladimir Putin in Russia or Xi Jinping in China, they increasingly have resorted to repression as their economies have slowed or declined without delivering against corruption, pollution, or arbitrary rule. Many politicians today are responding to this rise of populism by simply putting their head in the sand, hoping that the winds of change will blow over. Others are actually emulating the populists, hoping somehow to preempt them when in fact they're just reinforcing their message. What we need is a real, vigorous reaffirmation of human rights. We need to explain that human rights are the best way to avoid corrupt and arbitrary rule. Human rights are the best way to ensure that a government hears and can respond to the actual needs of its people. And human rights are the best way to actually change government if they stop delivering for their people. Above all, the public needs to reaffirm the basic value that we should treat others the way we want them to treat us. That's the best way to ensure that we all don't end up on the wrong end of the stick when a government abandons its commitment to human rights.
Now to the United States, where anti-Trump protesters plan to stage a series of rallies to condemn the president-elect's campaign rhetoric against minority groups, including Muslims and immigrants. Organizers say the demonstrations will kick off later on Saturday and will continue until January the 20th, when Trump takes the oath of office. In Washington, civil rights leader Al Sharpton plans to lead a march on the Capitol, where Trump's inauguration ceremony will be held. Some Democratic lawmakers say they will join Sharpton in the Saturday march. While running for president, Trump called Mexican immigrants rapists and proposed a travel ban on all Muslims entering the U.S. The country has witnessed such demonstrations since the Republican billionaire won last November's race for the White House.
We kind of see the greater polarization now. As you just mentioned, you're very correct, that usually after all the divisiveness of a long election campaign, which we've had, everybody would take some steps back during the inauguration and give the president some time to roll out what his administration plans are, because they said there's plenty of time to attack those issues. But the people need to basically take a breath, get the hysteria down a little bit, and try to change gears. Let's now start dealing with policies rather than ideologies. And the ideology wars basically just have everybody at each other's throats. And the people behind the scenes love that, because that takes away attention from some of the major issues facing the country, like some of the economic ones, some of the horrible foreign policy things that we see. So I think this is when you see people like Al Sharpton getting involved in it, you know that they're just in there to grab the attention. And we're hoping that, and what realizes now is Trump's already starting to back off on some of his campaign rhetoric, which they've always basically said things during the campaign that they have no intentions of doing. Like Reagan and even Carter, I think it said that they were going to move the Israeli embassy to Jerusalem during the campaigns, but then never did it afterwards.
I want to turn to politics now. On this Martin Luther King weekend, Donald Trump finds himself in a heated war of words with a civil rights leader, Congressman John Lewis, who nearly lost his life during that historic Bloody Sunday march, calling Trump an illegitimate president. The president-elect firing off on Twitter and his words sparking swift backlash. ABC's Mary Bruce has more from the White House.
On this Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, Donald Trump is taking on a civil rights icon, tweeting that Congressman John Lewis is all talk, 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 no action or results. Sad. Trump hitting back after Lewis said he is not a legitimate president.
I don't see this president-elect as a legitimate president. I think the Russians participated in helping this man get elected.
Some are urging Lewis to reconsider, citing the need for a peaceful transition of power. President Obama saying this right after the election.
The people have spoken. Donald Trump will be the next president.
But tonight, Trump's harsh words for Lewis sparking an onslaught of outrage. Senator Cory Booker saying anyone who attacks John Lewis loses legitimacy in my eyes. Democratic Congressman Jim Himes tweeting this photo, saying that's John Lewis almost dying for freedom and voting rights. Donald Trump not worthy of uttering John's name. Even Republican Senator Ben Sasse saying John Lewis and his talk have changed the world. The Georgia congressman is a civil rights giant, one of the original Freedom Riders. Seen here linking arms with Martin Luther King Jr. Lewis was badly beaten marching to Montgomery on that bloody Sunday. Late today, Lewis responding to Trump in a DNC fundraising email. Writing, he said that I'm all talk and no action. I've been beaten, bloody, tear-gassed, fighting for what's right for America. On Twitter, Lewis's own constituents coming to his defense after Trump said his district is in horrible shape and falling apart, not to mention crime-infested. One saying horrible, we love our home, our Atlanta neighbors, and our John Lewis. Lewis has been challenging the new administration, even testifying against Trump's pick for Attorney General, Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions, highlighting his concerns about Sessions' views on race.
We need someone who's going to stand up, and speak out. We need someone as Attorney General who's going to look out for all of us, and not just for some of us.
Why take the unprecedented step of testifying against Senator Sessions?
I grew up in Alabama. I know the state, I know the South.
And Mary Bruce joins us live from the White House. The president-elect is heading to Washington early this week, and you're hearing he will be there on Monday to mark the MLK holiday?
That's right, Cecilia. The president-elect will be here to mark the life and work of the civil rights legend and to visit the new Museum of African American History, a museum that was created at the urging of John Lewis, who's featured in some of the exhibits.
They ignored the freezing temperatures to gather in a traditionally black church just a few streets away from the White House. This was a show of support for undocumented migrants, people Donald Trump says he will deport when he takes control. Elsewhere in Washington, other protesters took to the streets in freezing rain to voice their fears of the incoming administration and the new president. In 63 other cities, those angry at the election result have been trying to do what they failed to do at the ballot box, and that's derail Donald Trump's policies. And the voices of dissent will get louder, the numbers will get bigger as the inauguration gets closer.
Human Rights Watch just released the World Report for 2017, and it takes aim at incoming U.S. President Donald Trump. In its annual report on human rights threats, the nonprofit non-governmental organization said the U.S. and the president-elect pose a human rights risk. Human Rights Watch Executive Director Kenneth Roth linked Trump and his supporters in the U.S. to European far-right parties, gaining popularity through divisive policies and rhetoric. According to the group, these parties justify violating human rights because they claim the public accepts it as necessary. Specifically, the group warned against promises of prosperity and security through harsh policies that often violate basic human rights. Focusing on Trump, the report says his campaign was marked by misogynistic, xenophobic, and racist rhetoric. It also says the president-elect embraces policies harmful to vulnerable communities. The report also took aim at several strongman leaders in Russia, China, the Philippines, and Turkey, and said the rise of populist leaders in the U.S. and Europe allows abuse from other leaders worldwide. The group says in order to protect human rights, the government must dedicate themselves to rejecting intolerance.
In the middle of the Mexican desert lies the skeleton of a Ford factory. The U.S. auto company scrapped the $1.6 billion project in January. That decision came after President-elect Donald Trump threatened stiff import tariffs for vehicles produced in Mexico for the U.S. market. The cancellation of the Ford project means 2,800 direct jobs are going up in smoke. Martina and 5 members of her family worked on the factory's construction and had hoped, like many, that they would continue working for the company. Traditionally a mining region, the northern state of San Luis Potosí has become an automotive hub, with more than 200 businesses setting up shop. Trump had repeatedly criticized the Ford project, but the closure of the factory took the area by surprise. And San Luis Potosí, like Mexico as a whole, is hoping it's not a taste of more to come under the new U.S. president. Trump has accused U.S. companies that ship jobs abroad for cheaper wages of getting away with murder. And while the Ford closure hurts Mexico, it's not a killer blow for the industry there. Still, with 80% of Mexican exports destined for the United States, Trump's protectionist stance is certainly cause for concern.
On Saturday, China responded to President-elect Donald Trump's suggestion that the One China policy could be changed under his administration. Under the policy, the United States recognizes China as the sole government of Taiwan, which the Republic considers a renegade province. The policy dates back to 1972 and has been upheld by every president since Richard Nixon. A spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry said in a statement, "There is only one China in the world, and Taiwan is an inalienable part of China's territory."
Martial law lengthening your stay. It's bullshit. You know, I have to protect the Filipino people. It's my duty. And I tell you now, if I have to declare martial law, I will declare it. Not about invasion, insurrection, not about danger. I will declare martial law to preserve my nation, period. Wala akong pakialam dyan sa Supreme Court. Because the right to preserve one's life and my nation, my country, transcends everything else. Even the limitation. Kung gusto ko, at it will deteriorate into something really very virulent, I will declare.